Hi, Shalamatong. Shalimatong. Okay, stop. Please. Want to hear a couple of stories? Just letting somebody know that I'm going to read. I just have a quiet little group here. Hey, QB. Hi, anybody watching on replay. Thank you for coming to listen. Hi, Tracy. Britton's late down now, please. Please. She won't leave me alone. She is sweet. And she makes me sneeze. Choke, you know? Guys, ready for a couple of scary stories before bed or before starting your day? See if we can find something creepy. Right? What do you guys think? QB, aren't you up late? Don't you have to work in the morning, don't you? Aren't you going to be sleepy for school? For the kids? Or did you sleep earlier? Let me find a scary one. Let me find something good, guys, okay? Oh, QB, really? Are you going to go to work in the morning or stay home? You probably can't leave alone. You'll take a nap before you go in. That's good. Let's see. How about one called The Girl in the Mirror? How about that? From Cape May, New Jersey. Have you ever seen a ghost, Grandpa? 7-year-old Lisa asked my husband Joe as they sat on low stools on the front walk, weeding the flower beds together. Yep, said my husband of 41 years, laconically. I've never seen that word. Lisa's eyes grew large, and she shoved her golden hair back with a dirty hand, leaving a muddy streak on her freckled cheek. You have? She asked breathlessly. I saw one once, said Joe, giving me a mischievous sideways glance and the debonair grin that had won my heart so many years ago. I caught my breath, partly because Joe was still the handsomest rascal I'd ever seen, and partly because I knew what he was going to say next. But your grandma has seen a couple of ghosts. Now, Joe, I said in a reproachful tone from my seat on the porch steps. Now, Lily, he mimicked. Lisa whirled around to look at me. Grandma has seen ghosts? She cried, obviously thrilled with the idea. Tell Lisa about our trip to Cape May, Joe said. We went there on a weekend getaway for our 40th anniversary, and we stayed in a haunted house. Meow. It was obvious that no more weeding was going to be done until I told my story. I handed out the lemonade waiting for us on the wicker table next to the porch swing and began my tale as we sipped its cool sweetness. Well, your grandpa booked us into a luxury bed and breakfast in the heart of historic Cape May. It was an absolutely beautiful Italianate mansion built around 1860 with lovely gardens, luxurious rooms, and amazing food. The property is surrounded by a 150-year-old hedge grove, which makes a convenient barrier between the bustling trees of Old Cape Cod and the peaceful atmosphere of the inn. You sound like a brochure, Lily, Joe said teasingly. Cut to the chase and tell Lisa about the ghost. I gave Joe a mocking glare and told him to hush. Then I related the following story. We checked into the inn on Friday afternoon, and soon we're unpacking our suitcases in the master suite that Joe had booked for the honeymooners. It was furnished with beautiful antiques and featured a huge fancy bed, a large wardrobe with a full-length mirror in it, a flat fireplace with a red sofa beside it, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and a lovely sun porch. As I stood brushing my hair in front of the mirror, I caught a whiff of expensive perfume. For a moment, I felt as if a woman, was staring at me from the doorway to the suite, which was strange because the door was closed. Joe, I called, even though I knew he had stepped out onto the sun porch. Joe reappeared, swept me in his arms, and waltzed me all around the room. Some place, eh? He said, giving me a kiss. Some place, I agreed, and followed him out of the suite. We went to a romantic restaurant in town for dinner, returning quite late. As we walked down the hallway on our way to the suite, I happened to glance into one of the ornate mirrors on the wall and saw the reflection of a pretty woman in a long gown. She smiled at me, and I caught a whiff of the same perfume I had smelled earlier. I turned around to look at the woman, but there was no one there. I looked back into the mirror and saw the woman giggling at my confusion. Now that would be creepy. Again, I whirled around, but there was still no one standing where the reflection indicated the woman should be. And why is this so dark all of a sudden? Look how dark. And now the light now that is weird. Again, I whirled around, but there was no one standing where the reflection indicated the woman should be. My heart throbbed and my skin prickled superstitiously. What are you looking at, Lily? Asked Joe, who had forged ahead while I was staring into the glass. The girl in the mirror disappeared as soon as Joe joined me. I thought I saw something, I said weakly. I was shaking with astonishment, but I felt no fear. The girl's face had been too friendly and full of life for me to be afraid of her. As we entered our room, I thought I heard the rustle of long skirts, as if a young woman was hurrying back the way we had just come. In spite of my uncanny experience, I slept soundly in the beautiful room. The next morning, I stood in front of the big mirror trying to decide between two outfits. Suddenly, the friendly girl in the old fashioned gown appeared in the mirror. She was standing beside me next to the bed. When she saw the dress I held in front of me, she held her head and pointed to the one I had left on the covers. Just then, Joe called out something from the bathroom. There you are, David. I sent you a message. I thought you were probably sleeping, but I sent it anyway. Hey, Larky. Just then, Joe called out something from the bathroom, and the girl disappeared. Hastily, I donned the dress draped on the bed and went to take Joe his razor. You look wonderful, honey, he said, giving me a kiss full of shaving cream. This is called The Woman in the Mirror. She's seeing a ghost at this hotel that her husband booked. After a delicious breakfast, we spent the morning exploring the mansion and the grounds. Joe chased me up and down the ornate spiral staircase, trying to tickle the back of my knees, and later he waltzed me around one of the elegant ballrooms. I caught a glimpse of the girl in some of the mirrors as we whirled about. She was dancing gracefully, but she had no partner. I waved to her and saw her wave back as Joe took me through an elaborate turn. Ooh. Hi, Michelle. For some reason, even a friendly ghost waving in the mirror back to you and smiling and dancing. It seems even creepier than something scary. I don't know why. Just hitting me like that. Later, we walked hand in hand through the gardens and then sat for a while on the veranda, sipping iced tea. I grew used to the odd glimpses I caught of the girl whenever I walked past a mirror. She seemed fascinated by me and Joe. It felt like I was being spied upon by a happy-go-lucky younger sister. At one point, Joe remarked that he liked the smell of the perfume I was wearing. Not sure how he would respond to the notion of of a ghost. I didn't tell him that it was not my perfume he smelled. We spent the afternoon on the beach and enjoyed another lovely dinner. It was our last night at the inn. As we walked to our room, I caught another glimpse of the girl. She smiled at us from the same mirror in which I had first seen her. This time Joe saw her too. Hi, Kathy. Look, Lily, he said. They must be having a costume ball. He turned around to look at the girl, then snapped his eyes back to me when confronted with an empty hallway. Here's the illustration. Where did she go? He asked in confusion. In the mirror, the girl started to giggle, and I grinned at her. She's right there, I said calmly, pointing to the mirror. Joe stared at her in astonishment, looking first into the mirror and then back to the empty spot where the girl should have been standing. It is creepy, right? This is some sort of joke, right? He asked cautiously. No joke, dear, just a ghost, I said. The girl waved to Joe in the mirror and curtsied. We both heard the rustle of her skirts as she moved. The smell of expensive perfume filled the hallway as she disappeared. Okay, that's enough of the paranormal for one day, Joe said rather hastily. He escorted me into our bedroom and deliberately covered the mirror on the wardrobe with a blanket before we went to bed. I thought I heard a faint laugh from the direction of the covered mirror just before he put out the lights. I wouldn't be getting in that bed. I'd be hitting the road. We checked out of the hotel the next morning. As, as we walked one last time through the handsome rooms, I caught a glimpse of the girl watching us from an ornate mirror in the entrance. I waved to her and she smiled. Joe saw my gesture from the corner of his eye. He looked into the mirror, gave the girl a cordial nod, and then swept us out of the door and away from that lovely haunted mansion. I finished my story and my lemonade at the same time and rose to my feet. Now, why don't we finish weeding the front garden before it gets too hot? I proposed. Aw, Grandma, Lisa groaned, but she handed me her glass and stood up. Do you think other people have seen the ghost? She asked, as Joe swung her off the steps, whirled her about, and then put her on the sidewalk beside her weeding stool. I asked the owners about it, I said. Apparently, we aren't the only ones who have seen the girl in the mirror or smelled her perfume. They call her Esther, and they think she might be the niece of the man who built the mansion back in the 1860s. The ghost of Esther, Lisa said. I like it. Maybe Mom and Dad and I can go stay at the inn in Cape May sometime. Maybe, I replied with a smile. Then I shooed my husband and granddaughter back to their weeding and went to wash our empty glasses in the kitchen sink. Let's see what the next one's going to be. Um, hey, Puddin'. Now we're going to read The Sweet By and By from Bernadette Light, and this is New Jersey. Matilda held her baby daughter close to her chest, humming softly as the hold of the ship swayed and rattled and shook in the terrible storm. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore, she whispered, saying against her baby's silky soft hair, knowing how impossible it was to hear in the roaring noise below deck, but hoping something of the tune or rhythm, or perhaps just the buzzing hum, would calm the fretful infant. Not that Matilda blamed the baby for crying. After 3 days of sailing through the winter storm swept sea, she felt like crying herself. Her stomach would hold no food, and even when she was lying on the bed in the small captain's cabin, she could barely keep her balance as the ship rolled from side to side. Hi, Mary. You made it. Thanks, Tracy. Matilda had barely seen her husband, the captain, since the howling storm had begun. He and his crew were doing everything they could to keep the iron-hulled schooner from sinking into the ocean. They had invested all of their money in this voyage, and her husband was determined that the journey would not fail. She just prayed that everything he was doing to keep them afloat would be enough. By this time, Matilda didn't care about the ship, so long as they survived the storm with their lives. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. I know that's not the tune, but I can't think of it right now. Matilda crooned the words of the Samuel Bennett song again to comfort herself as much as the baby. Suddenly, the ship gave a terrible jolt and shook from stem to stern, throwing mother and baby off the bed. Matilda cradled the infant tightly, managing to twist around so that the baby was not injured in their fall. The swaying of the ship was different now. It rocked violently backward and forward, as if it was somehow beached and the waves were trying to knock it over. Matilda was terrified, realizing that they must have run aground. The ship would be torn to pieces. Matilda could hear the sailors shouting outside, their voices rising above the thunderous roar of the wind and sleet and rain. She crouched on the floor, sliding from one side to the other as the ship tilted. She did not dare rise, knowing she would fall immediately and not wanting to risk any injury to her daughter. The little baby was screaming now, so Matilda started singing again, even though her throat was so tight she could barely breathe and her heart thundered in her chest. That sounds horrible, doesn't it? Sounds terrible. And she sang, "There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar. For the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore." Come up and sing it, Davida. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. I don't know why I can't remember the tune to that. Must be too late. The door to the cabin burst open, and the captain staggered in, grasping the door frame tightly to retain his balance. "We've struck ground, but it's all right," he shouted. "The lifesavers on the beach have fired a grappling hook, and we've got it secured against the side of the ship. They're sending an iron life car out for the crew. You and the baby will go ashore on the first trip." That'd be horrible, wouldn't it? He helped Matilda to her feet and tenderly wrapped her and the baby in a winter cloak to keep them warm against the frigid air outside. Then, holding them tightly with one arm and clutching the wall for balance with the other, he slid them carefully through the cabin door. The first mate leapt up the icy, tilted deck to help the captain steady mother and daughter, and the other sailors pulled a long iron tube toward the ship. When it reached the side, the captain urged his wife to get in. "What about you?" Matilda asked. She knew her husband well. Something in his manner told her that he was keeping a secret. "I'll stay here until the crew's been evacuated," he hedged, trying to lift her into the lifeboat. Matilda resisted, glaring at him through the roaring wind and sleet. "And then you're coming ashore?" she demanded. He nodded, not meeting her eyes, and Matilda knew immediately that he was lying. Everything that possessed her was on this ship, and all of their money was sunk into the cargo. Everything they possessed was on this ship. That's what I meant. If the ship went down, they lost everything. If by a miracle the ship survived the storm, the first person to tow her into harbor would be able to claim the ship and all she contained by right of salvage. The captain would never let that happen. The ship had an iron hull, so it had a better chance than most of surviving. Knowing this, he had elected to stay aboard and try to salvage what he could after the storm. If that failed, he would go down with the ship. "Thank you, Julie Johnson. Thank you for coming." "Hi, Vicki. I didn't see you." Turning, Matilda thrust the baby into the first mate's arms. "Take her," she commanded fiercely. "Take her to shore and keep her safe. Her father and I will come for her after the storm. Only pray that we do not drown." The first mate protested violently, but seeing the look in her eyes, he took the baby. The captain swore and shouted and tried to lift his wife into the rescue boat, but she fought him fiercely. "I won't leave you. I won't," Matilda shouted back. The second mate gestured to the first mate. "Yep, she is, Michelle," to get aboard the lifeboat. They did not have time to interfere in this argument. The crew needed to get off the storm-tossed ship as soon as possible. And so, while husband and wife raged at one another, the crew evacuated. Finally, the captain tore at his thinning hair in dismay and agreed to let Matilda stay. After everyone else had departed, The couple lashed themselves with rope to the mainmast as best they could, entrusting their lives to the mercy of God. They held each other close as the grounded ship was buffeted back and forth by the huge waves. Once ashore, the first mate, a local couple that lived nearby, found a local couple that lived nearby to care for the infant while he helped with the rescue efforts. Even after all of the crew was safely on land, he remained on the beach, huddled under several blankets that the thoughtful islanders had given him, watching the ship where the captain and his wife waited out the storm. It was bitterly cold. The men of the island urged him to take shelter and stay warm by the fire, but the first mate kept returning to the beach every hour or so to look out to sea at the ship he had left behind. To his surprise and joy, when the storm finally blew itself out, the battered ship was still intact. He and several fishermen rowed out as soon as it was safe, and the first mate sprang aboard, calling out to his captain. There was no answer. It took but a moment for him to locate the couple lashed to the main mast. They were locked in each other's arms, their heads resting tenderly against one another. They had frozen to death during the fierce winter storm. That's horrible. The big burly mate first broke down and wept when he saw them, and even the tough island fishermen sniffled as they carefully cut the captain and his wife down from their perch. The couple was buried on the island, and their tiny daughter was adopted by the kind people who had cared for her the night of the shipwreck. The husband was one of the fishermen who had returned to the ship with the first mate after the storm. Every night he would take the baby on his knee and tell her about her brave parents who loved her so much that they sent her to safety while they stayed with their vessel. 2 weeks after the wreck, another winter storm blew in during the early evening. The loud roar of thunder woke the baby, who had just been put to bed. The infant started wailing, and the fisherman instantly put aside his book and ran upstairs. As he descended the steps a few moments later, his besotted eyes fixed on the mite in his arms, the fisherman's wife shook her head and smiled. Then she went to the kitchen to fix a bottle while the fisherman rocked the baby tenderly, humming the tune of The Sweet By and By. The first mate had told him that it was the lullaby the infant's parents had used to get her to sleep at night. Suddenly, from outside the rain-lashed window, the fisherman heard two voices joining him in the first verse of the hymn. There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar, for the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. Really, Michelle? Aw. The fisherman went to the window and looked outside. Strolling down the road in front of the house was a handsome couple wearing heavy coats, winter scarves, gloves, and hats. They were walking hand in hand and singing together, seemingly oblivious to the brutal wind and lashing rain. They carried no lantern, and yet they were bathed with a heavenly light that seemed to glow from their faces and clothing. Their feet did not touch the ground. The fisherman recognized them at once. It was the frozen sea captain and his wife. They paused in front of the house and sang the second verse of the song. We shall sing on that beautiful shore the melodious songs of the blessed, and our spirit shall sorrow no more, not a sigh for the blessing of rest. In the fisherman's arms, the baby stopped crying as she listened to her parents' voices. Behind him, the fisherman could hear his wife in the kitchen singing along with the chorus. The glowing couple gazed longingly up at the house, and the fisherman held their baby up to the window so that they could see her. The infant cooed and waved a tiny fist as if in greeting. The captain and his wife waved back, and Matilda mouthed the words, "Thank you," to the kind fisherman. Now that's given me chills from, a nice chill. Then they were gone. "You've got her calmed down," said the fisherman's wife, re-entering the parlor with the bottle in her hand. He blinked away tears and handed the baby to his wife. "That's the song her parents always sang to her," he told her gruffly. "Then we must sing it to her as well, in remembrance of them," said his wife. "In remembrance," he echoed, glancing out the window at the now empty road. He pondered on the appropriateness of the song the couple had chosen for the child's lullaby. In his heart, he was sure that one day the parents and their daughter would meet again. "In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore." Oh, that was sweet. Let's see, what else we got here? Let's see. Just a minute, guys. Really, Michelle? That's sweet. Hi, Elizabeth T. Just trying to find another story real quick. Um, let's see. Here's one called Shades of Death, Warren County, New Jersey. Gotta take a little sip here. This will probably be the last one. Just going to be a quickie tonight. 5:17 a.m. The darn kids were always stealing the road signs. Actually, it was not just the kids. Some adults also thought it was cool to have a huge green and white sign that said Shades of Death Road. Ugh. So whenever I had a moment, I would hike up to the intersection closest to my house and coat the pole with goose grease to make climbing it difficult, if not downright impossible. I considered it my little contribution to the neighborhood. Okay, QB, enjoy your nap. You got a long day at work. Probably not a long day, but you know what I mean. A car pulled up beside me in the dusk of a beautiful summer night, and a voice called, "Hey, mister, do you know where Shades of Death Road is?" I calmly placed a little more goose grease on the pole, looked up at the street sign, and said, "You're on it, son." From inside the car, I heard chuckles of relief. "I told you we weren't lost," the lad's girlfriend said from the passenger side. The boy thanked me and drove off down the road, looking for adventure. Sometimes the silly young ones found it, sometimes they didn't. You're welcome, QB. Good night. Having finished with the grease, I carefully wiped the paintbrush and put everything away in my backpack. Shouldering it, I started walking down the beautiful woodland road on which I made my home. It was a shady spot, which is why it was originally called Shades Road, but it also was off the beaten track, narrow and windy. Both wildcats and robbers had found it a convenient place to attack and kill travelers. In the late 1700s, many members of the local Lenape tribe contracted malaria carried by mosquitoes from a nearby swamp and began dying off. The road gained such a gloomy reputation that the name was changed to Shades of Death Road. For those with the eyes to see, the spirits of the Lenape still linger here, rising with the fog over Ghost Lake and retreating only with the return of day. Most people drive right through the ghost without seeing them. Of course, people are usually looking for more dramatic specters, like the evil spirit of the woman who murdered and decapitated her husband, burying his head on one side of the road and his body on the other. Or the ghost who stomps around the lake grounds and then retreats to an abandoned cabin, leaving footsteps in the mud or the snow, depending on the season. One girl I won't name claimed to have been chased down the road by a single glowing light that was as tall as a truck's headlights, though there was no truck behind her. The stories are numerous, and many of them are false, but not all. I have a few drops of Lenape blood in me, and I'm one of the few who can see the shades of my brothers rising with the fog. This particular night seemed like a good one for a sighting, which was part of the reason I chose to walk all the way to the intersection with my goose grease at dusk. Great pillars of fog were rising off Ghost Lake. Yes, you must have been. Around me, dusk had dusk had deepened into night, but I knew the way well and walked without a flashlight. I didn't need one. The glow from the ghost lit my way. I watched a shining canoe move across the water, paddled by two Lenape intent on reaching their destination. If wherever that might be, they passed right through a group of men dancing and singing around a fire. I stopped to observe the dancers, knowing that when they finished, a storyteller would appear and speak the old age tales of our people. Right on cue, a venerable old man stood up among the crowd. Leaning gravely upon a stick for support, he began the creation story with Kunawat, Iowat, Newchink, meaning long, long ago in the beginning. The old man spoke of how there was nothing at all in the beginning except endless space in which the Creator dwelt. Then the Creator had a vision of the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth. He dreamed that on earth there were mountains and valleys and trees, land and sea, creatures that crawled and walked, slept and ate, loved, hated, lived and died. He touched the wind, feeling all the emotions of those to come. Then the Creator's vision faded, and he determined to make his dream become reality. Slowly, I moved on, watching Lenape women cooking over small fires that flickered within the fog, and nodding to a few Lenape hunters who silently passed me on the road. From the middle of the lake, I saw a huge turtle emerge with some mud upon the back of its shell. It was Tax Wax, the turtle that carried new earth on its back after old earth was drowned in a great flood. Nana Push, the strong, pure one, the grandfather of beings and men, had sent several animals to old earth to retrieve some mud from which to make the new. Little Muskrat was the only creature to survive the trip. Nana Push placed the mud the mud little muskrat had retrieved from the depths onto the back of, hey, Lisa T, the back of Tackwax, who swam through the floodwaters, while a great island grew and grew above him. This was New Earth, called Turtle Island. As a reward for his help, Tackwax became the messenger of thoughts and feelings between different beings. I was nearly home when I heard a beautiful song coming from the trees. Looking into the branches overhead, I saw a glowing bird with bright feathers of many colors. I recognized him at once. It was Rainbow Crow, who had brought fire down from heaven to earth to warm its inhabitants after the coming of the cold. As he carried the hot flame in his beak, he was burned black, his lovely voice choked so that he could only caw from that moment forward. Because his bravery saved the life of the creatures of earth, he is honored by all animals and hunters. And the Creator himself placed a hint of a rainbow within Crow's shining black feathers as a reminder of the great sacrifice he made. I turned into my driveway and saw the familiar figures of a Lenape father and son standing before their round wigwam, discussing something seriously. I nodded to them as I walked slowly past, and they nodded back. Moments later, the front light snapped on and my wife opened the door. She was not blessed with the spirit sight, and she urged me to come in out of the darkness and the damp night air. With a small sigh, I left the shades of death in the past and came back to the present. As I followed my wife into the house, I heard the drum beat start again and knew that the ancient one's story had finished and the dancing had begun once more, deep inside the pillars of the fog over Ghost Lake. Love you guys. Have a good day at work, Elizabeth T. Oh, for corn's sake. Love y'all. Thanks for coming, guys. Really appreciate it. Just a little quickie tonight. Night, guys. Have a good day. See ya. See you next time.